Ambassador Zethkri of the Hegemony Coalition woke up that morning expecting another boring day of paperwork and trade disputes. The tall, blue-skinned diplomat had been dealing with humans for over 20 years, and they never failed to make his job complicated. Their messages filled his inbox every day: trade requests, cultural exchange programs, complaints about shipping delays, and their endless chatter about everything from sports scores to new recipes for something called pizza. He poured his morning stimulant drink and sat down at his communication console, ready to face another day of human problems. But something was wrong. The screen showed no new messages from any human colonies, no trade requests from Earth, no complaints from human merchants, no silly jokes forwarded by human diplomats. Nothing. Zethkri frowned and checked his equipment. Everything worked perfectly. He tried calling the human embassy on Kepler Station. No answer. He tried the trade office on New Geneva. Silence. He even tried calling Earth directly, something he rarely did because humans on their home world were always too busy talking to each other to answer official calls properly. Still nothing. By noon, Zethkri was worried enough to call his friend Commander Thrak of the Krex Empire. The Krex were a warrior species who usually hated talking to anyone, but they had learned to work with humans because humans were surprisingly good at military strategy. "Thrak, are your people getting any messages from humans today?" Zethkri asked. The reptilian commander's face appeared on the screen, looking confused. "Now that you mention it, no. We sent a request for their help with a tactical problem this morning. Usually they answer within an hour with at least 3 different solutions and 2 jokes. We have heard nothing." Next, Zethkri called Dr. Elin of the Manthari Science Council. The Manthari were known for their logical minds and careful record-keeping. If anyone would notice a pattern, it would be them. "Dr. Elin, when did you last receive communication from any human source?" The insect-like scientist clicked her mandibles thoughtfully. "Yesterday at 23:47 Galactic Standard Time. Dr. Sarah Chen from Earth sent her weekly research report. She was studying something called cosmic background interference. Quite fascinating work, actually." "Why do you ask?" "Because no one can reach any humans anywhere in the galaxy." Within hours, the news spread across all major species. The Veltar Trade Consortium confirmed that none of their human business partners were responding. The peaceful Jara meditation centers reported that their human students had not attended morning classes. Even the criminal networks noticed. Human smugglers had missed scheduled meetings, and human pirates had not raided any ships. Emergency meetings were called. Investigation teams were formed. Every major species sent ships to check on human settlements, expecting to find some explanation. Perhaps a new human holiday no one knew about. Perhaps some kind of technology malfunction. Perhaps humans were playing one of their strange pranks on the galaxy. But what the investigation teams found was far more disturbing than anyone expected. The first team to report back had visited New Tokyo, a bustling human colony with 2 million residents. Captain Voss of the Alterian Navy described what they found in his official report. "The colony appears completely normal from orbit. All lights are functioning. All systems are running. Landing was routine. The automated systems worked perfectly. But when we entered the residential areas, we found something impossible. Meals were still warm on tables. Children's toys were scattered on playroom floors as if the children had just been playing. Workstations showed half-finished projects, but there were no humans anywhere." Similar reports came from dozens of other locations. Human ships drifted through space with engines still running and food still cooking in their kitchens. Space stations operated normally with all their automated systems functioning, but no crew members could be found anywhere. Most disturbing of all was what investigation teams found on human starships. In one case, they discovered a cup of coffee that was still hot, sitting next to a chair where someone had been reading a book. The book was open to the middle of a chapter, with a bookmark placed between pages as if the reader planned to return in just a few minutes. The Hegemony Coalition's top scientists worked around the clock trying to understand what had happened. They checked for signs of disease but found none. They looked for evidence of mass evacuation, but human ships and equipment remained in place. They searched for traces of teleportation or dimensional travel, but their instruments detected nothing unusual. Dr. Silith, a Manthari xenobiologist who had studied human behavior for many years, made the most unsettling observation of all. Based on the evidence, humans did not leave voluntarily, she reported to the Emergency Council. They did not pack belongings. They did not shut down systems. They did not say goodbye. Whatever happened to them occurred suddenly and simultaneously across the entire galaxy. But here is what troubles me most. We have found no bodies, no remains, no traces of violence. They simply vanished. As days passed without any sign of human life, something unexpected began to happen. The galaxy's communication networks, which had always been filled with the constant noise of human chatter, became noticeably quieter. Ships traveled more slowly because human pilots were no longer available to take risky, but profitable routes through dangerous space. Trade negotiations took longer because humans were not there to translate between species who barely tolerated each other. Ambassador Zethkri sat in his office 1 week after the humans disappeared, staring at his empty inbox. For the first time in 20 years, he had no human problems to solve, no human requests to process, no human complaints to address. He realized he missed them terribly. Outside his window, the massive space station continued its routine operations. Ships came and went. Aliens of dozens of species went about their daily business. But something fundamental had changed. The galaxy felt different somehow. Quieter, more serious, less hopeful. Zethkri opened a new file on his computer and began typing his first report about the human disappearance. As he wrote, he tried to capture not just the facts, but the strange feeling that had settled over everything since humans vanished. The humans are gone, he wrote, and somehow the galaxy feels smaller. He did not yet understand how right he was. In the weeks and months to come, the full impact of humanity's disappearance would become clear. The species of the galaxy were about to learn just how much they had depended on the loud, annoying, impossibly optimistic race that had been connecting them all together. But for now, all they knew was the silence. And that silence was growing deeper every day. The investigation was just beginning. The real discoveries lay ahead. And the truth, when they finally found it, would change everything they thought they knew about humans, about the galaxy, and about the price of keeping everyone safe. The silence had only just begun to speak. 3 weeks after the humans disappeared, the galaxy began to understand what it had lost. The first sign came from the Veltar Trade Consortium. Chairman Kleck stood before his board of directors, his tentacles trembling with worry as he read the quarterly reports. "Our profits have dropped by 60%, he announced to the shocked board members. "We are facing the worst economic crisis in our history." The problem was simple but devastating. Humans had been their best customers. While other species bought practical items, weapons, fuel, basic foods, scientific equipment, humans bought everything else. They purchased decorative crystals that served no useful purpose. They collected art from species they had never met. They bought musical instruments they could not properly play, and books written in languages they barely understood. Other species had always laughed at humans for this. Why do they want such useless things? They would ask. Now they understood. Human curiosity and their strange desire to own beautiful or interesting objects had kept entire industries alive. The Manthari luxury goods sector had collapsed overnight. The Jara meditation crystal mines had stopped production. Even the Krex Empire's weapon manufacturers were struggling because humans had been their second largest customer base, buying ceremonial weapons and armor for their strange collecting hobby. But the economic problems were just the beginning. Commander Thrak of the Krex Empire discovered the military implications during a routine strategic planning meeting. His top generals sat around the war table, trying to solve a tactical problem that had been bothering them for months. "How do we attack the rebel base on Kepler 7? Asked General Voss. "Their shields are too strong for direct assault, and the asteroid field makes it impossible to surround them." The generals suggested various solutions. Orbital bombardment, too risky because of civilian colonies nearby. Long siege, too expensive and time-consuming. Stealth infiltration, too dangerous because of the base's sensors. "What would the humans suggest?" asked General Krix without thinking. The room fell silent. For the past 5 years, whenever the Krex military faced a difficult problem, they had quietly asked their human allies for advice. Humans had a gift for finding solutions that no one else considered. They thought in ways that made no logical sense but somehow worked perfectly. "They would probably suggest something impossible," Thrak said sadly. like training space whales to carry explosives or using the asteroid field's gravity to slingshot a missile around the planet's moon. And somehow it would work. Commander Thrak realized that 40% of their successful military operations over the past decade had used strategies originally suggested by humans. Without human creativity, the Krex Empire's military effectiveness had suddenly dropped to levels not seen. Since before first contact, Dr. Silith made an even more troubling discovery while reviewing communication records in the Manthari archives. She had been studying patterns of interspecies cooperation, trying to understand why the galaxy seemed less stable since humans disappeared. What she found shocked her. Humans had not just participated in galactic civilization, they had been its foundation. In conflicts between species, humans had served as mediators. When the Veltar and the Alterian Federation stopped speaking to each other over a trade dispute, humans had maintained relationships with both sides and slowly rebuilt communication between them. When the Jara spiritual leaders declared that Krex military exercises were disturbing the cosmic harmony, humans had organized a cultural exchange program that helped both species understand each other better. When 3 different species claimed the same planet for colonization, humans had suggested a time-sharing agreement that somehow satisfied everyone. Dr. Silith discovered that in the past 50 years, humans had prevented or resolved over 200 potential conflicts between other species. They did this not through superior military power or advanced technology, but through their strange ability to understand everyone's point of view and find solutions that made sense to all parties. Humans were the social glue that held our civilization together, she reported to the Manthari Science Council. Without them, we are reverting to the same isolation and suspicion that existed before first contact. Her prediction proved accurate, faster than anyone expected. The first major breakdown occurred between the Veltar Trade Consortium and the Hegemony Coalition. The two groups had an old disagreement about shipping routes through the Cygnus sector. For 20 years, humans had managed the schedules and made sure both groups got fair access to the profitable routes. Without humans to coordinate, both groups sent ships to the same routes at the same time. Accidents happened. Accusations were made. Within days, the Veltar had banned all hegemony ships from their spaceports. Similar problems erupted across the galaxy. The Alterian Federation and the Krex Empire remembered old territorial disputes. The Jara meditation centers accused the Manthari science stations of polluting the spiritual environment with their research. Species that had worked together for decades suddenly could not agree on simple cooperation protocols. Ambassador Zethkri found himself busier than ever, but in all the wrong ways. Instead of processing routine trade agreements and cultural exchanges, he was trying to prevent wars. "We need to find the humans," he told the Emergency Council during their daily crisis meeting. "Every day they remain missing, our civilization becomes more fractured." But the investigation teams had found nothing new. Human settlements remained empty but undamaged. Human ships continued to drift through space with no crew aboard. Most disturbing of all, human research stations showed signs of active projects that had been interrupted mid-experiment. Dr. Yalta, an Alterian physicist, made an interesting discovery while examining one of these research stations. She found evidence that humans had been working on something called dimensional barrier technology in the months before they disappeared. Their research notes mentioned something called the silence between stars, she reported. They seemed to have believed that some kind of threat was approaching the galaxy from outside normal space-time. The research notes were incomplete and difficult to understand. Human scientists had a habit of writing in informal language and making references to concepts that other species found confusing. But one phrase appeared repeatedly in their final communications: "We may be the only ones who can do this." As the galaxy continued to fall apart without human mediation, the investigation teams began to suspect that humanity's disappearance was not random. The timing was too perfect, the completeness too absolute, and the research notes suggested that humans had known something was coming. Dr. Silith presented her final analysis to the combined councils of all major species. "Believe humans did not disappear by accident," she announced. "The evidence suggests they chose to leave. But why they made this choice and where they went remains unknown." The assembled representatives sat in stunned silence. The idea that humans had voluntarily abandoned the galaxy was almost unthinkable. Humans loved being part of galactic civilization. They were the most social species anyone had ever encountered. They made friends with everyone, even species that most others found annoying or dangerous. If they chose to leave, asked Ambassador Zethkri, then they must have had a very good reason. Dr. Silith nodded grimly. Yes, and I suspect we will not like that reason when we discover it. Outside the council chambers, the galaxy continued its slow slide toward chaos. Trade routes were abandoned. Research projects were canceled. Military tensions increased daily. Cultural exchange programs ended as species retreated into their own territories. The universe felt colder somehow, less connected, less hopeful, and in the empty human settlements, automated systems continued to operate, maintaining the cities and colonies as if their creators might return at any moment. Gardens were watered. Streets were cleaned. Communication arrays continued to broadcast, sending human voices and human music into the void, creating echoes of a species that was no longer there to hear them. The galaxy was learning a hard lesson about the value of something only after it was gone. But the hardest lessons were still to come. 6 months after humanity vanished, the galaxy was falling apart. The Hegemony Coalition faced its first major war in 3 centuries. The conflict began with a simple trade dispute between the Alterian Federation and the Krex Empire over mining rights in the Vega system. In the old days, humans would have stepped in within hours, organizing meetings and finding compromise solutions that satisfied both sides. Without human mediators, the dispute escalated quickly. The Alterians accused the Krex of breaking an old treaty. The Krex claimed the Alterians were trying to steal territory that belonged to the Empire. Both sides sent warships to the contested system. Ambassador Zethkri tried to arrange peace talks but discovered something alarming. He could not remember why the 2 species had agreed to work together in the first place. Looking through the historical records, he found that most of the major treaties between different species had been written with human help. Humans had a talent for understanding what each species needed and finding ways to give everyone enough to be satisfied. Without humans to explain the reasoning behind these agreements, the treaties seemed confusing and unfair to everyone involved. "We agreed to share the Vega system mining rights," said Admiral Chentar of the Alterian Federation during a tense negotiation session, "but we cannot remember why we thought this was a good idea." General Throck of the Krex Empire nodded agreement. "The treaty gives you 60% of the mineral wealth, but you provide only 40% of the defense forces. This makes no sense to us now." Ambassador Zethkri realized the problem. The treaties had made sense when humans explained the logic behind them. Humans understood that Alterians were better at mineral extraction, but weaker at military defense, while Krex were excellent warriors, but had less advanced mining technology. The agreements had been designed to let each species contribute their strengths, but without humans to remind everyone of this reasoning, the treaties just looked like random numbers that favored some groups over others. The war in the Vega system spread quickly. The Veltar Trade Consortium chose sides based on which group owed them more money. The Manthari Science Council tried to remain neutral, but was forced to choose when both sides demanded access to their research data. The peaceful Jara meditation centers found their space monasteries caught between battle fleets. Similar conflicts erupted across the galaxy. Old grudges that humans had helped resolve returned stronger than ever. Species that had worked together for decades remembered why they disliked each other before humans arrived. Dr. Silith documented the collapse in her research journal. "Without humans to maintain social connections between species, we are reverting to the isolation that existed before first contact. But worse, we now have advanced weapons and knowledge of each other's weaknesses that we did not possess. Before, the technological problems were just as serious as the political ones. The galaxy's rate of scientific progress slowed to almost nothing. Research teams discovered that humans had been involved in nearly every major breakthrough of the past 50 years. Not because humans were smarter than other species, but because they were willing to try ideas that seemed impossible. Dr. Yalta found evidence of this while reviewing the archives of the Alterian Advanced Physics Institute. In the past decade, the institute had developed faster-than-light communication, improved shield technology, and new medical treatments that extended life for all species. When she looked at the research records, she found that humans had contributed to every single project. Humans had a unique approach to scientific problems, she explained to the Institute's board of directors. When we said something was impossible, they would ask, but what if we tried it anyway? Most of their suggestions failed, but the ones that worked changed everything. The problem was that other species were too logical. They would calculate the probability of success before beginning experiments. If the chances were low, they would not waste time and resources on the attempt. Humans, however, seemed to believe that impossible things might be possible if you tried them in the right way. Without human researchers suggesting crazy experiments, scientific progress ground to a halt. Worse, many existing technologies began to fail because they required human-style maintenance. Human engineers had a gift for fixing machines in ways that made no logical sense, but somehow worked perfectly. The space station Kepler Prime experienced this problem first. The station's main computer system had been designed by a joint human-Manthari team. When the computer began having problems, the Manthari technicians tried to fix it using standard repair procedures. Nothing worked. The human engineers always fixed this computer by talking to it, reported Chief Technician Velth in frustration. They would speak to the machine as if it were alive, and somehow that would solve the problems. We cannot replicate this procedure. Similar maintenance crises occurred throughout the galaxy. Human technology was failing, and no one else could repair it properly. Ships that humans had modified were breaking down. Colonies that humans had helped design were experiencing system failures. Even weapons that humans had improved were becoming unreliable. But the most serious discovery came from Ambassador Zethkri himself. While reviewing the final communications from human research teams, he found references to a hidden research station in the Horsehead Nebula. The station was mentioned in several messages, but its exact location was encrypted using human coding systems that no one else could read. Zethkri assembled the best code breakers from all major species. Working together, they spent 3 weeks decoding the location data. When they finally succeeded, what they found changed everything. The research station was enormous, larger than most space cities. It had been built in complete secrecy over several years, using resources that humans had quietly purchased from dozens of different suppliers. No single species had known about the full scope of the project. When the investigation team reached the station, they found it abandoned like all other human facilities. But unlike other sites, this one contained detailed records of what humans had been working on in their final months. Dr. Sarah Chen's research logs told the terrifying story. We have detected what we are calling the silence between stars. Her final video message explained, it is a wave of anti-consciousness moving through dimensional space toward our galaxy. Any mind it touches becomes empty, not dead, but simply blank. No thoughts, no awareness, no sense of self. The wave was vast beyond imagination, moving through dimensions that most species did not even know existed. It had already consumed 3 other galaxies, leaving behind planets full of living beings who could eat, sleep, and breathe, but who could no longer think or feel or dream. We estimate the wave will reach our galaxy in approximately 8 months, Dr. Chen continued. We have found only one way to stop it. A species with the right neural patterns can create a dimensional barrier by willingly removing themselves from normal space-time. They become a living shield that the wave cannot pass through. The video message paused as Dr. Chen looked directly into the camera. We are the only species with the right neural patterns. Our brains are chaotic enough to survive the dimensional transition and maintain consciousness outside normal reality. We are the only ones who can do this. The final entries in the research logs showed humanity's last desperate weeks. They had tried every other solution they could imagine. They had attempted to build mechanical barriers, but the wave passed through them easily. They had tested other species to see if any could make the transition, but the neural patterns were wrong. Only humans could become the barrier, and only all of humanity together would be strong enough to stop something so large. The investigation team sat in stunned silence as they finished reading the logs. Humanity had not disappeared. They had sacrificed themselves to save everyone else in the galaxy. But the most shocking discovery was still to come. According to the research data, the anti-consciousness wave was still approaching. Humanity's sacrifice had bought time, but the barrier was not permanent. It required constant maintenance from the other side of dimensional space. And according to the calculations, the barrier was already showing signs of weakness. Ambassador Zethkri realized that while the galaxy had been fighting wars and struggling with technological failures, humanity had been fighting a battle on behalf of everyone else, a battle that they might be losing. The investigation team raced back to report their findings, but as they traveled through space, they noticed something that made their hearts freeze with fear. The stars in the outer rim of the galaxy were beginning to flicker, and the space between them was growing darker. The anti-consciousness wave was getting closer, and somewhere in the space between dimensions, humanity was running out of strength to hold it back. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was the largest gathering in recorded history. Representatives from every known species crowded into the assembly hall on Kepler Station. Even species that had been at war just days before sat side by side, united by the terrible knowledge that Ambassador Zethkri had brought back from the Human Research Station. The anti-consciousness wave will reach the core systems in less than 2 months, announced Dr. Silith, presenting the data that humanity had left behind. If the dimensional barrier fails completely, every thinking being in our galaxy will become an empty shell within days. The evidence was impossible to deny. Long-range sensors were detecting the effects at the galaxy's edge. Automated systems continued to function normally, but any ship that ventured too far into the outer rim returned with crews who could pilot and navigate perfectly, but could no longer speak, think, or recognize their own names. The wave left its victims alive but mindless. They would eat when food was placed in front of them and sleep when it became dark. But they showed no curiosity, no emotion, no sense of self. They had become biological machines, still breathing but no longer truly alive. Commander Thrak of the Krex Empire stood to address the assembly. Our best scientists have analyzed the human research data. They were correct. Only a species with human neural patterns can maintain the dimensional barrier. No other known brain structure can survive the transition to extra-dimensional space while retaining consciousness. A Manthari scientist raised her claw. What about artificially modifying our neural patterns? Could we change our brains to match human structures? Dr. Yalta shook her head sadly. We tried that simulation. The process would destroy everything that makes us who we are. We would become human-like, but we would no longer be ourselves. And the research suggests it might not work anyway. Human consciousness developed naturally over millions of years. Artificial copying might not have the same resilience. The terrible mathematics were clear. Humanity had been the only species capable of making the sacrifice that could save everyone else. And they had made that sacrifice without asking for permission or thanks, disappearing quietly to become a shield between the galaxy and annihilation. But the sacrifice was failing. According to the monitoring equipment at the research station, Dr. Silith continued, the dimensional barrier is weakening. Humanity is struggling to maintain it. The wave is too large and they have been fighting it alone for too long. Ambassador Zethkri stood slowly, his blue skin pale with exhaustion. He had been working without sleep for days since returning from the research station, trying to understand the full scope of humanity's sacrifice. The research logs contain one piece of hope, he said. Humanity left detailed instructions for how other species can help strengthen the barrier without joining them in extra-dimensional space. We cannot replace them, but we can support them. The plan was complex and dangerous. Each species would need to contribute their unique abilities to create what humans had called resonance. Amplifiers, devices that could channel the mental energy of entire civilizations across dimensional barriers. The Manthari would provide the mathematical calculations needed to tune the amplifiers to the correct dimensional frequencies. The Krex Empire would contribute their mental discipline and focus. Their warrior training made them excellent at maintaining concentration under pressure. The Veltar Trade Consortium would supply the rare materials needed for construction, using their commercial networks to gather resources from across the galaxy. The Alterian Federation would provide the advanced manufacturing capabilities to build the devices. The Jara meditation centers would contribute their spiritual techniques for joining minds across vast distances. Even smaller species had important roles. The aquatic Delphi would provide harmonic frequencies, and the crystalline shard speakers would offer their natural ability to resonate across multiple dimensions. But the plan required something that had never been attempted before: complete Cooperation between all species in the galaxy. We must set aside every disagreement, Ambassador Zethkri told the assembly. Every territorial dispute, every trade conflict, every cultural misunderstanding. Humanity sacrificed everything to give us this chance. We cannot waste it on our petty differences. The voting was unanimous. For the first time in galactic history, every species agreed to work together without reservation. The construction began immediately. Shipyards that had been building weapons of war were converted to produce resonance amplifiers. Scientists who had been developing new ways to fight each other instead collaborated on technologies to strengthen humanity's dimensional barrier. But as the work progressed, troubling questions arose. What happens when this is over? Asked Dr. Yalta during a technical meeting. If we succeed in permanently strengthening the barrier, humanity will remain trapped in extra-dimensional space forever. We will never see them again. The question haunted everyone involved in the project. Humanity had saved the galaxy, but at the cost of removing themselves from it permanently. There was no way to bring them back without destroying the barrier that protected everyone else. Some species suggested they should accept this sacrifice and move forward. Others argued they should find a way to rescue humanity even if it meant finding an alternative defense against the wave. The debate was resolved by an unexpected discovery. Dr. Chen's final research notes contained a message that had been overlooked in the initial panic. Hidden in the technical data was a simple text file labeled, "If you are reading this, we know that our sacrifice will seem permanent to you," the message read. But we have discovered something wonderful in this extra-dimensional space. We are not alone here. There are others who made similar sacrifices to save their own galaxies in ages past. We are learning from them, growing stronger, becoming something new. The message continued with words that brought tears to the eyes of species that did not normally cry. Do not mourn for us. We chose this path not because we had to, but because we wanted to. We wanted to save our friends. We wanted to protect the galaxy that became our home. We wanted to make sure that the future remains bright and full of the voices we love to hear. Work together. Help us strengthen the barrier. But most importantly, become the civilization we always believed you could be. Show the universe that different species can be family. That is the real victory against the silence. Not just stopping it, but proving that consciousness and hope and love are stronger than emptiness. We are still human. We are still your friends. And someday when the galaxy is safe and you no longer need protection, perhaps we will find a way to return. Until then, live the lives we helped save. Make them beautiful. The message was signed simply, "Your annoying neighbors, humanity." Reading those words, the assembled species understood what they needed to do. This was not just about building technology to strengthen a barrier. This was about becoming worthy of humanity's sacrifice. The wars ended immediately. The Altarian Federation and Krex Empire not only stopped fighting, but began sharing military technology to improve the resonance amplifiers. The Veltar Trade Consortium started giving away rare materials instead of selling them. The Manthari scientists opened their most secret research to everyone. Species that had barely spoken to each other for centuries began working side by side. Cultural exchange programs that had been canceled were restarted on a massive scale. Art, music, literature, and ideas flowed freely between worlds that had been isolated for generations. The galaxy was becoming everything humanity had always said it could be. And in the monitoring stations, the sensors showed that the dimensional barrier was growing stronger every day. The resonance amplifiers came online one by one, each one adding the mental energy of entire civilizations to support humanity's efforts. The anti-consciousness wave, which had seemed unstoppable just months before, slowed its advance and finally stopped completely at the galaxy's edge. But the most important victory was not technological. It was social. The galaxy had learned to work together without needing humanity to translate between different viewpoints. They had discovered that they could choose cooperation over conflict, understanding over suspicion, hope over fear. They had become the civilization that humanity had always believed they could be. And somewhere in the space between dimensions, humanity felt the change and smiled. 5 years after humanity vanished, the galaxy had become a place they would barely recognize. The great resonance amplifiers hummed quietly on 1,000 worlds, their crystalline structures channeling the combined mental energy of every known species to support the dimensional barrier. The anti-consciousness wave had not only been stopped but pushed back, retreating into the empty space between galaxies where it could harm no one. But the greater victory was not technological. It was the transformation of galactic civilization itself. Ambassador Zethkri, now elderly and gray around his temples, stood before the first meeting of the Galactic Unity Council. The old hegemony coalition had been dissolved and replaced with something unprecedented. A true democracy where every species, no matter how small or new to space travel, had an equal voice. Today marks the 5th anniversary of humanity's sacrifice, he announced to the assembled representatives. It also marks the completion of the human protocols, the guidelines for cooperation that we have developed to honor their memory. The human protocols had grown from Dr. Chen's final message. They were not laws or treaties, but principles that the galaxy's species had chosen to follow. The first protocol was simple. When facing a difficult decision, ask what humans would have suggested. The answer was usually something impossible that somehow worked. The second protocol was more complex. Every species brings unique value. Find ways to help others contribute their strengths instead of competing over weaknesses. This had revolutionized everything from scientific research to military defense. The third protocol was the most important. Choose hope over fear, understanding over anger, cooperation over conflict. Even when it seems difficult, especially when it seems difficult, following these protocols, the galaxy had achieved things that seemed impossible just years before. The Krex Empire had transformed from a military dictatorship into a peacekeeping force that protected smaller species from threats. Commander Thrak, now General Thrak, led missions to rescue colonies from natural disasters and helped establish defense systems for worlds that could not protect themselves. The Veltar Trade Consortium had evolved into a resource-sharing network that ensured no species went without basic necessities. Instead of maximizing profits, they focused on distributing goods efficiently to where they were needed most. The Manthari Science Council had opened their research to all species, creating joint projects that advanced knowledge at an unprecedented rate. Dr. Silith had become the galaxy's leading expert on interspecies cooperation, developing new techniques for helping different cultures work together effectively. But the most remarkable change was in how species talk to each other. Before humanity's sacrifice, most diplomatic communications had been formal and careful, designed to avoid giving offense or revealing weakness. Now influenced by humanity's example, species communicated with warmth and humor. Trade negotiations included jokes. Peace treaties contained expressions of friendship. Even military communications often ended with expressions of good wishes for the other side's families. The galaxy had learned to be more human. Dr. Yalta made the most significant discovery while monitoring the resonance amplifiers. She detected something that the monitoring equipment had never registered before: response. Signals coming from the dimensional barrier itself. I believe humanity is trying to communicate with us, she announced to the Unity Council. The signals are complex, but they follow patterns that might be language. Working together, the galaxy's best linguists and mathematicians spent months decoding the signals. The breakthrough came when someone suggested treating the patterns like human musical structures instead of traditional language. The first successful translation was simple: "Thank you." More messages followed as the communication system improved. Humanity reported that the dimensional barrier was stable and strong. They described their new existence as challenging but not unpleasant. Most importantly, they expressed pride in what the galaxy had accomplished. "You have become everything we hoped you could be," one message read. "The cooperation we see through the barrier fills us with joy. You have learned to be family to each other. This is the greatest victory of all." But the most meaningful communication came when the galaxy's species decided to share their own achievements with humanity. Children from every world contributed drawings and stories about life in the new galaxy. Scientists sent reports about discoveries made using human-inspired research methods. Artists created works that celebrated both human sacrifice and galactic unity. The response from humanity was immediate and overwhelming. Pure happiness transmitted across dimensional barriers in a way that every species could feel, regardless of their sensory capabilities. "We are not lost," came the reply. "We are part of everything you do. Every time you choose cooperation over conflict, we feel it. Every time you help someone different from yourselves, we grow stronger. Every time you solve a problem by asking, "What if we tried anyway?" we smile. The communication system allowed for regular contact, transforming humanity's sacrifice from a tragic loss into an ongoing partnership. Humanity could not return to normal space, but they could watch and guide and celebrate as the galaxy continued to grow. Ambassador Zethkri, now in his final years of service, established the most important tradition of the new galactic civilization. Every child, regardless of species, would learn basic human language as part of their education. Not because humans were superior, but because learning to think in human concepts, to ask why not, instead of why, and to believe that impossible things might be possible, made everyone better at solving problems and working together. The tradition began with a simple phrase that every child learned first. "Hello, universe. We are here, and we are friends." 10 years after humanity's disappearance, the galaxy faced its first major test of the new unity. A natural disaster, a series of stellar collapses, threatened to destroy an entire sector containing dozens of inhabited worlds. In the old days, each species would have tried to save only their own people, leading to competition for limited rescue resources. Instead, the galaxy responded as one. Krex warships provided escort for Veltar cargo vessels carrying Manthari-designed evacuation equipment. Alterian engineers worked with Jara spiritual advisors to calm panicked refugees. Every species contributed what they did best, and the evacuation was completed with 0 casualties. The success was celebrated across the galaxy, but the greatest celebration came from the dimensional barrier itself. Humanity's joy at seeing their sacrifice validated, transmitted through the resonance amplifiers as a wave of warmth that every being in the galaxy could feel. 25 years after humanity vanished, something unprecedented happened. Dr. Yalta, now the galaxy's chief dimensional physicist, detected new patterns in the barrier signals. After months of analysis, she made an announcement that changed everything. "Humanity has learned how to thin the barrier selectively," she reported to the Unity Council. "They cannot return to normal space, but they may be able to send echoes of themselves, temporary manifestations that could interact with our dimension for brief periods." The first successful manifestation occurred on the anniversary of humanity's sacrifice. In the center of the Unity Council chambers, the air shimmered and a familiar figure appeared. Dr. Sarah Chen, translucent but unmistakably real. "Hello," she said, her voice carrying across the silent chamber. "We wanted to thank you in person." The manifestation lasted only minutes, but it was enough. Dr. Chen confirmed that humanity was not just surviving in extra-dimensional space, but thriving. They had learned things about the universe that no one in normal space could imagine. They had grown and changed and become something new while remaining fundamentally human. "We chose our path," she said as the manifestation began to fade. "We chose to protect our family, and you have proven that our choice was right. You have become the galaxy we dreamed of." Ambassador Zethkri, now ancient but still serving as the Unity Council's honorary chairman, asked the question that everyone wanted answered. "Will you ever be able to come home?" Dr. Chen smiled, the same warm, impossible smile that humans had always worn when facing the unknown. "We are home," she said. "We are part of everything now. Every time you help someone, every time you choose hope over fear, every time you solve an impossible problem, that is us coming home. We live in the choices you make." As the manifestation disappeared, her final words echoed through the chamber. "Keep being impossible. Keep being hopeful. Keep being human, all of you." The galaxy kept that promise. 50 years after humanity's sacrifice, children of dozens of species played together in parks that existed, because humans had taught the galaxy to share resources instead of fighting over them. Scientists made discoveries using human-inspired techniques that turned impossible into inevitable. Artists created beauty that celebrated both diversity and unity. The anti-consciousness wave had been permanently contained. New galaxies were discovered and contacted, and each one was welcomed with the warmth and curiosity that humanity had taught their neighbors to show. And in the space between dimensions, humanity watched and guided and celebrated, no longer separate from the galaxy but woven into its very fabric.